definitely extended the actual timeline, but also the feeling. And Jets fans, just by nature, are impatient, I think, regardless. But I think ultimately I feel pretty good about where it went, the route we took, and where we ended up. I think obviously I put more of an emphasis on head coach, and I think you and I have talked quite a bit, and I think Aaron Glenn was at the top of that list, you know, especially after the Vrabel news broke and you knew kind of where he was going and him heading to New England. So you thought, all right, AG's number one. And I think no matter what route gets us there, as long as we get there, we'll be okay. So I feel good. I feel good about where they ended up. The process in itself, I think ultimately they got where they wanted to go, and I'm glad it was as thorough as it was. You know, we can discuss the 33rd team and their impact on it, but I think ultimately, as a Jets fan, you got to wake up this morning and obviously after the news yesterday afternoon, getting Aaron Glenn and a guy with high upside, doing what he did in Denver, working under Elway, working with Patton, like that's what you kind of want to see. And I think you feel pretty good if you're a Jets fan today. How about you? How are you feeling after this?
Yeah, I feel good. Here's the thing. Like you said, I feel like we're impatient, which is totally true after, 15 years of just being essentially a laughingstock and having one winning season to show for, no playoff appearances. It's kind of warranted that the fans are impatient. And we have no idea what Aaron Glenn's going to be. We have no idea what Darren Mougey is going to be. But I think, all in all, the process I thought was good. I know they met with everybody and it kind of seemed a little bit unnecessary. Like, talking to a guy like Mike Loxley and some other guys, whatever, like Lance Newmark. We could get into that a little bit. But look, we don't know. And I'm not going to be like these guys are a lock to succeed. I'm not going to be like these guys are a lock to be horrible. We really just don't know. But, it's very easy to root for Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn is somebody that, I was really young when he played for the Jets. I wasn't as close to the team, like following it because I was young. I know you were probably, you're obviously a little bit older than me. I'm not trying to age you or anything, but you do remember his playing days better than I do. I kind of remember the tail end before he went to the Texans, but it's like hard to not root for this guy. It's like, it's everything you want in a head coach because it just seems like he cares so much about this team. It's kind of like everything that the pro Rex crowd loved about Rex, you kind of get with Glenn, except you don't have the history of how it ended poorly. It's like, we don't know what it's going to be. He's younger. He's more forward thinking. Like, it seems like he's very into analytics, even though he's definitely like an old school football guy at heart. But like, look, it's his rumored staff, which nothing's been confirmed yet. It sounds very promising. And I think that's so important, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, but we don't know. But he's got all my support in the world. I was very happy when they made the hire because ultimately once Vrabel wasn't realistic, it was him or Brian Flores. Those were the two guys I really wanted. And yes, Flores having more experience, as a head coach compared to nothing that Glenn has certainly makes a difference of why I was very interested in him. But anybody who says like he's never done it before, it's a mistake, whatever, you don't know. I mean, everybody's got to start somewhere. And ultimately, you look at a guy like Dan Campbell, who he came from his coaching tree. He got hired, no experience. People laughed at the press conference. And look at him now. I know that their season didn't end the way that they had hoped it would, but, they've turned it around from a culture standpoint. They have built a winning program. They've gotten the right guys in place. Obviously, we'll see how they work now that Glenn and Ben Johnson aren't here. But it's hard to not be excited just because of like the history with him and him, how much this place means to him and him understanding what it means to work for the Jets organization, both as a player and a scout, and now as the head coach. So I that's like kind of my long-winded, thoughts on Glenn, but I'm excited. I don't know. I'm not going to be like, he's going to be great. I feel like I've suckered myself in with Robert Saleh, Todd Bowles, never suckered myself into Adam Gase, knew it was a disaster, but like, I've always been like, this guy's gonna be great, but like, I don't know, but I'm hoping he's great. But what do you think about Glenn?
Yeah, I really like the hire. And I think you said a lot of good things here and kind of encapsulated it very well. To have a guy that's homegrown, like born and bred, New York Jet from day one, drafted in the first round, played 8 years here, like went through the changes, right? Drafted by Pete Carroll, suffered 2 years in the Rich Kotite. Then Parcells gets here and he goes through the turnaround. And then you go from 97 to his last year in 01, they were good, right? They turned it around in 97. They go 9-7, just missed the playoffs. 98 was the magical year where they could have won the Super Bowl, right? Should have gotten there, obviously. '99 was a tough year with Vinny. 2000 they were competitive again. 2001 they make the playoffs in the first year with Herm. So like you've seen him, and he has seen this and had success. The difference between him and what you're like, I think the excitement around Aaron Glenn is obviously it's warranted. We're all excited. I think the talk of his staff, and you brought it up, is really important. Where that shakes out and how that lands, I think obviously is going to be like the key here. I think that's where you kind of saw the previous regimes fail, right? Like Robert Saleh had rookies all around. And we talked last time on our show, like the impact of Greg Knapp's death and what that had on this team. And obviously Zach Wilson in the quarterback room. But Greg Knapp was one guy and he was a quarterback coach. You look at really outside of everyone else in the Robert Saleh staff, like they were all rookies. There wasn't really that experienced guy. You go back to Adam Gase, and we all hated Adam Gase, right? But one of the biggest problems that we had was he was taking a second-year quarterback in Sam Darnold, and he was only going to have himself and his best buddy Dowell Loggins in the room. You go back even further, right? Todd Bowles, like who did he really have on his staff? Like it was his best buddy Casey Rogers as the defensive coordinator. Like, so when you look even further back and you go to Rex Ryan and the success he had early, why, right? He had Mike Westhoff on his staff, an experienced guy that's been around the block, that's a no-nonsense dude, clearly has been through how many coaching staffs, like has seen it all, aligned himself with Bill Callahan, right, who is still the offensive line coach. Like those are the things that you really like to see when you're building out a staff. So I think as this process has gone on and as we've gotten deeper and deeper into this drought, like you kind of see the importance of the different things. And I think that's why really ultimately, not only that Aaron Glenn is homegrown, not only that he has this accountability factor, that he's not afraid of confrontation, like all this stuff. I think those are the types of things where you kind of learn from your past and you see why Aaron Glenn brings those things that are going to be different from years past and different from the failures of these past staffs, and make it to where, okay, this has a real chance to succeed. He very well could flop. Like we have no idea what these guys are going to be. But it's the things that are different that make you feel good about what Aaron Glenn can bring. And that's what I like.
Yeah, of course. Like we're not going to sit here and just sell you on the Kool-Aid of Aaron Glenn. Like we're excited about him. We like what he could become. But again, until it happens on the field, it doesn't matter what we say or what we think. We're fans. We're people that, do content about the team. But like, again, we're not Aaron Glenn. We have no idea what his approach is going to be. And I'm excited about the presser. I'm excited to see some of the things he's going to say. But like going back to the actual staff itself, obviously nothing's been set in stone, but there's been a lot of rumblings of who will be joining the staff. I love the prospect of Steve Wilkes joining. Has head coaching experience, is a good defensive coordinator, felt like he was unfairly scapegoated in San Francisco after they were literally in the Super Bowl and could have won that Super Bowl. And they already fired the guy who replaced him. So I don't think he necessarily is the problem, but I think having guys who have head coaching experience on the staff, like him, potentially Todd Haley, who I know everyone's like, he's crazy, but like,
I love that idea.
First of all, he's coached on the Jets assistant staff before. So he has a kind of a history of understanding what it is. He comes from the same tree as Glenn, which I think is cool. But I think having as many guys, if you're a first-time head coach with head coaching experience, or even just like a lot of experience in terms of being coordinator, whatever it may be, is good. I don't think Westhoff is going to be on the staff because there were rumors. It seems like he's going to be helping out with training camp and kind of being like an advisor to him, but he's not going to have an official title on the staff. He'll probably be like a consultant kind of thing, which I love too. Like, I think it's great.
Any Westhoff is better than no Westhoff. Like, let's just put that out there, right?
I remember having conversations with my cousin when Westhoff was the special teams coordinator during the Rex years, and we always be like, isn't it amazing how much space they have on kick returns? It was great, like with Joe McKnight, with Leon Washington, whoever you talk about. It was crazy.
Justin Miller, Brad Smith, like he put anyone back there, and they would immediately just run kickoffs back for touchdown.
Yeah, it was awesome. We actually got someone in the comments saying Todd Haley, hard no, but keep in mind, Todd Haley's not going to be the offensive coordinator. He'll probably be a senior offensive assistant. He won't be somebody who's like really like in the weeds. It's more about helping the offensive staff specifically for someone like Nick Caley, who potentially is going to be the offensive coordinator. Seems like he is the favorite right now. Obviously, nothing's happened with that. But anybody who is interested to learn more about him, I really encourage you to listen to the Athletic Football Show. Our good friend, Zach Rosenblatt, friend of the program, friend of the Badlands universe, obviously has flight planned and has been in our Discord. He did an episode with Robert Mays earlier this week after they hired Aaron Glenn and talked about Todd Haley. I mean, not Todd Haley. Oh my God. Nick Caley. Excuse me. I can't. Todd Haley, Nick Caley. It's kind of the whole same thing. Anyway, he talked about how much McVay loves this guy. And it seems like this guy is exactly what the Jets need. It's like a forward-thinking mind who comes from the right tree. Again, We've already went down this road with Mike LaFleur. Obviously, he was Shanahan, but now he's with the McVay system, and apparently he's loving it out there. He doesn't want to leave. But I think going outside of just hiring someone on the Detroit staff to be the offensive coordinator because you have familiarity is great. I think that's great that he's doing that. It seems like he's trying to have a blend of guys who've coached with him, whether it be in Detroit or New Orleans, but also guys who've overlapped with people he trusts, which I think is great. But I think just having a mix of experience and youth is perfect for what this team needs. I think, like you said, not Todd Bowles. I was going to say Robert Saleh. He hired too many guys who didn't have the experience. Like basically everybody who he hired for the initial staff was their first time in those roles. I think Ulbrich had interim defensive coordinator experience, and he ended up actually being a good DC. I forget what he was as an interim head coach. But I think having a blend of everything is perfect in what this team needs. I also just feel like he's going to be the front man, which is a little bit different than what the Jets have had in the past. And I feel like they trust him to kind of just be the face of the organization, which I think is super exciting.
I totally agree. I love it. And I think really what brings me back is like the Parcells heritage combined with Sean Payton. Like Parcells is held in high regard across the NFL, but when you speak to Jets fans specifically, like he turned this ship around. So you bring Parcells up here, and when he speaks as highly as he does of Aaron Glenn, like that just gets you excited. When guys like Sean Payton have what they have to say about guys like Aaron Glenn and about Darren Mougey or Darren Mougey.
Darren Mougey.
Darren Mougey. Thank you. I'm all over the place. Those are the things that really, say what you want, but when football guys like Bill Parcells and Sean Payton say things about the candidates that you've hired, like it leaves you feeling good. And time will tell, but I think you've got to be excited about the trajectory that this is taking right now. And I think you hit the nail on the head too, with kind of giving Aaron Glenn more of the power, like letting him kind of dictate where things are going. I think that's the change of pace this organization needs.
Yeah. I think it's kind of crazy that Sean Payton was giving us like basically a seal of approval on a guy that's worked for him. It seems like he hated the Jets, but I don't think he hated the Jets. I think he hated Nate Hackett. And it's just weird and like not something you would have expected if you had this conversation a year ago, if the Jets were potentially hiring a new GM and head coach. But here we are. Times change. The whole regime is being turned over. I do want to get into Mougey, even though I feel like I know. I'm not going to act like I know so much about it. I've read about him. I've heard some things. I'm encouraged. But again, first-time GM, he's never been in the big chair before. I have no idea if he can do this or not. And I like that he's a younger general manager. I think that he'll be more forward-thinking in terms of analytics and really player evaluations and positional value and whatnot. I just really hope that his front office is going to be new people. Like if they want to keep Phil Savage in as a senior advisor, if they want to bring on Tannenbaum or even Spielman to be like a special advisor to him, like I'm fine with that. But ultimately, everyone else who's in whatever capacity, if it's like, pro personnel, college scouting, whatever it may be, assistant GM, like I want all of that to be new people. I'm tired. We don't need any more carryovers. It's just not working. And I think if you're really trying to rip this to the studs and build it the right way, the entire front office needs to be remade. And this has been a conversation we've had for a long time. I feel like this goes back to really like when Bradway was like surviving every regime. And it just seems like they've never figured out a way of fully cleaning it out. And now's the time. Just do it. What do you think about him? And then we'll go into Mougey a little bit more specifically.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think when you get to a spot like the Jets are in now, in a 14-year playoff drought and things going in 2024 the way that they did, I think you need to cleanse yourself of everything. And I don't think there can be any holdovers. And as good as some of these guys may be at their jobs, I mean, you said it, and we don't know the ins and outs of the front office, right? You're not going to see that like you do play on the field or coaches, but I just think it's time for a fresh start, and I would like to see just brand new everything. The fact that he is 39 years old, that leads you to believe that he's going to be more analytical, that he's going to use that stuff differently, which will be obviously exciting and a welcome change of pace. But yeah, I think they have to rid themselves of everything that had to do with this 2024, this last 14 years. I mean, everything associated with it, I think, just has to get torn down to the studs, and they got to start fresh. And there's no reason they can't do that while still remaining competitive in 2025. Like, they have a nucleus here. They have good players and a decent roster. I mean, they can make this work, and we've seen it happen. Look at Washington. It's going to play, in a couple hours here. Like, this can happen. It's not out of the norm for it to. There's no reason you can't be competitive in 2025 while still completely washing the stink of 2024 and the 13 years prior to it off of you.
Yeah. I'm tired of people saying like they need time, they need this. Like, I'm not asking Aaron Glenn and Mougey to build a team that makes the playoffs next year. If they do that, amazing. Like, they're going to be based. You might as well put a statue of Florham Park for them. I'm not asking for that. What I'm asking for is them to get rid of some of the bad apples that have been in this locker room that I feel like have been toxic for years. I want them to figure out a plan at quarterback, preferably moving off Rodgers, but if they decide to keep him, it's fine. And someone just asked in the comments if we would be against running it back with him. It's not. I would prefer to move on because of the financial implications and really just getting out of this Douglas Saleh era. And keeping that, I feel like is kind of just like delaying the inevitable and kicking the can down the road. But if they decide that this is their best path towards building the right infrastructure down the road and maybe grooming a young quarterback, it could be someone they draft this year. It could be, just somebody that they trade for. I don't know what it is going to be, but I just want them to build a culture of accountability, a culture of, discipline. I don't want this to be the country club I feel like it's been where like Saleh was too nice. Like, I don't want to rag on Saleh because genuinely I think he's a good dude. I rooted for him until really I couldn't anymore because it just didn't feel like he was able to do this job, and that's fine. And like I hope he does well with San Francisco, except whenever he plays the Jets again, which probably won't be for 4 years. But they just need to establish something, and they need to show that this is like we're going in the right direction because we haven't really had a direction in so long, and that's what I want to see. But in terms of like Mougey as a guy, like he has good, reviews and raves from all people who work with him in the Denver organization. I like that, he worked his way up as from a scout all the way to assistant general manager in like a 10-year span, which is impressive in itself. He also saw, different teams. He saw a team that won the Super Bowl. He has a ring, but then he also saw what it's like when you don't have a quarterback and what you need to do to find the quarterback. He also saw, like, obviously they found Bo Nix, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but clearly he's a lot better than I thought he'd be. I wasn't a huge fan of Jaden Daniels either, but it goes to show you I don't know anything about evaluating quarterbacks. But I like his like mindset. I like that he's younger. But I think who he surrounds himself with is going to be so important, just like Glenn. There's rumors that Dave Ziegler, who is the GM of the Raiders, is potentially somebody who's going to be in the front office. Zach Rosenblatt reported that it's someone to keep an eye on. Nothing's confirmed, but I think that the fact that he's had the big chair, even if it was for like 2 years or whatever it may be, is good. I think getting people who've done these types of jobs is important. So I don't know. But let's see, what these guys say. We could talk about what we hope to see from them in the presser tomorrow, because ultimately that's going to be a very exciting time because it's like hope. It's a Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Let's see. Yeah. But what are your thoughts on what you've heard about Mougey so far?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I like everything that I've heard. I like that the fact that kind of the process that the Jets and the 33rd team took ended us up at a different place. Like, I was in Vegas this week, like you and I were talking. I was out in Vegas for work meetings, so I couldn't check. So I was kind of relying on you to hit me with the updates, right? Yeah. And I think we got to, I want to say Wednesday, and everything was pointing to Aaron Glenn and Lance Newmark. And like, it felt like a kind of necessary evil with Newmark because obviously we wanted Glenn, and it felt like they were tied at the hip. And so you would accept Newmark, and okay, 26 years with the Lions and just went to Washington, so you feel pretty good about it, and you're like, okay. But then you start digging a little further, and I'll be the first to admit, like, I don't know Lance Newmark from a hole in the wall, but I trust Joe and Connor. So when Connor comes out and he's kind of adamantly against Lance Newmark and the process and just ultimately getting you back to really the same thing that you've done year in and year out prior and with these things, that really turned me off. So then you start thinking about it more. So they hire Aaron Glenn on Thursday. We feel good about it. No Newmark news. And then it kind of drags out till Saturday afternoon. And ultimately you start hearing, okay, Darren Mougey is the guy that's probably going to get the job. And we're anticipating this. So I guess I feel just good that it went in a different and unexpected direction, and that they relied on all this intel and they did the thorough work to ultimately get here. I don't know Darren Mougey. I don't, but I'm excited at the prospect of him and being different and having high upside and 39 years old and working in an organization with the people that he worked with and getting the nod from people that are well-respected. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels good. And obviously time will tell. Like, we have no idea what his staff's going to look like. We have no idea what his drafts are going to look like, but I'll go back to this 14-year drought. And when you get to the root of it, right? Like, you think about the ineptitude from some of these drafts, especially in the middle rounds. Like, Joe Douglas was lauded for Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Jermaine Johnson, and
Sauce Gardner.
Sauce, thank you. but those were like easy chalk picks. But I'll read you some names here of these are 98 to 2008. These are rounds 2 through 7 picks, right? That's like the foundation of your roster. These are competent starters and role players. Jason Fabini, Ryan Young, Kareem McKenzie, Randy Thomas, Leon Washington, Sione Puha. Remember how devastated we were when Chris Jenkins went down in 08, and Sione Puha filled right in and then was the starter in 09 and 2010. And he was a third round find. Jayco, Brad Smith, Eric Smith, Matt Slauson was a good spot starter, went on to start for years with the Bears as a guard, 6th round pick. Dwight Lowry used to always come up with plays out of nowhere. Those are the spots where you find guys that ultimately lead to your success and lead to a foundation of a team that allows you to compete year in and year out. Whereas you look at what the Jets have done in years past, Max Mitchell can't find playing time. And when he does, it's awful. Michael Clemens, we all know about. Carter Warren can't find himself on the field. All of these guys that the Jets have drafted in rounds 2 through 7, 3 through 7, they can't find a spot. They can't find a spot on the Jets. They can't find a spot anywhere. And so I guess that's a long-winded way of saying time will tell, but I'm excited at the prospect of someone different and someone with a different frame of thinking being in charge of that, because that's ultimately where and how we're going to get back to the postseason and start building a sustainable winner.
Yeah, I forgot which guy on TV. I don't know if it was Kuiper or it was Daniel Jeremiah, but they made some statement. It was the teams that win championships win the draft on days 2 and 3. That's how you win. You need to build your why do you think Kansas City is obviously I know they have the best player in the world. I get that. But you know what they do? They're hitting on mid-round picks to complement that player. If you look at it, their team now compared to what it was when Mahomes became the starter, it's they're building defense and complementary pieces. I think their offensive line does need work, but it's been good for the most part because they've hit on mid-round picks. They took Trey Smith, who was a guy who I think fell for whatever reason, and the guy ended up being a Pro Bowler for them. So it's you need to hit on these mid-round picks. We can't just be all right, we nailed our first-round pick, successful draft. That's not how it works in the NFL. That's why you end up in a 15-year playoff draft, because you rely on 1 or 2 picks versus an entire draft class. We don't need to do the Idzik 15 or whatever, where you're to have a million picks, but at least hit the mid-round picks. Have a 6-player draft and maybe hit on 4 out of the 6. That's what you need to do.
And I mean, you look at Douglas's tenure, and the one that you can point to mid-round is probably Michael Carter II, where that's an actual hit. Outside of that, one guy. In 5 drafts. And honestly, I mean, even from 2024, Malachi Corley can't find a spot on the field as a 3rd-round pick. A guy they supposedly had ranked over Brian Thomas Jr. can't find playing time. That can't happen. So anybody would have excited me over Joe Douglas, honestly, especially right. But I'm very excited about the pairing of Mougey and Aaron Glenn. We talked about how devastating this past season was, and man, there's nothing that can get you excited because you've seen it all. But boy, have they pulled me back in. Here I am.
They always do, man.
They always do.
Just when I'm out, they pull me back in.
And to hear, you mentioned the press conference tomorrow, to hear the number of former Jets that are truly excited about this hire, excited about Aaron Glenn, and going to be in attendance for it, that gets you revved up too. You can't understate or overstate, I'm sorry, how important that is, and getting these players and the guys that have been there and done it to buy in, and the excitement level around AG. That's truly something special.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up the press conference. What are you looking to hear from either of them? You can maybe cherry pick 2 things you want to hear from them. You go first, and I'll tell you some things. And hopefully, we don't have the same thoughts.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I don't think they're not gonna shed too much light on what their plans are, quarterback or anything like that. But I'd really like to hear from Mougey. I think I'd like to hear what his draft process is going to be like how he's going to use analytics. That's going to be important to me. I think that's gonna we've talked about it already on today, but the change of pace that I think we're looking for. And I think from Aaron Glenn, I'd like to hear about accountability, and then really maybe what his defensive style is going to be like. I think that's something that I'm really looking forward to, is how he's going to change and adapt that. I'd like to get back to more of a blitzing style. I'd like to kind of, not so much the Rex Ryan era of always bringing heat, but definitely using it more and not just kind of relying. And I just feel as good as that Jets defense was in 22 and 23, I would have liked to see them be more adaptable, be more blitz heavy at times, like get into forcing the offense's hand more. So kind of hearing what Aaron Glenn's going to do from that perspective, I think will be exciting.
Yeah.
Back to the more attack style.
I think it was, I don't know if you read on ESPN earlier this week, Ben Solak wrote a really good piece about Aaron Glenn, how he believes that, that this is the right hire for the Jets. And like, he helped with the Lions turnaround. Now, why not the Jets? I think he essentially believes again. And Ben Solak has never really been the most complimentary person of the Jets. So the fact that he's saying this should actually hold something of value. And he's a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about from a football perspective. One of the pieces that really stood out to me, one of the excerpts, in that piece is that Glenn is all about adjusting to the opponent, but also adjusting to his personnel. And I feel like that was something that was really lacking in this past regime. It just seemed like they were so stubborn to this system. It's like they used to do the rotation versus keeping their guys out. They wouldn't blitz. They rely too much on on zone instead of man-to-man. And everyone always complained how Sauce was never traveling. I don't think that that's going to be the case with this defensive regime. I mean, look, we don't know who everyone's going to be, but like, I know Steve Wilkes is an aggressive blitzer, so I'm not worried about that if they do hire him. But I do think that they are going to maneuver their game plans and maneuver their use of personnel to the player's strength, but also the opponent and also what types of injuries they have. So that's something that's encouraging to me. But going back to Mougey, I just would love for him to say something along the lines of this. He's probably not going to say it because they're probably telling him not to say it. It's just be like, someone's probably like, so what do you want to do with Garrett Wilson or something? Let's just say that.
Yeah.
That Brian Castell's like, what do you feel about Garrett Wilson long term? I want him to be like, he's a talented player. I want his agent to call me and we could figure out how to make this a long-term partnership. Something along those lines. He probably won't say something like that because, they probably tell him don't talk about guys until, we have the full staff in place. But like, if he extends him within the next 3 months, you're going to win a lot of brownie points with this fan base because so many people in this fan base are worried that he's going to ask out. I think that the hire of Glenn, I mean, obviously I don't know about Mougey because I don't really think that they feel a certain way about the guys in the front office more than the guys who are actually coaching them and with them so close. Like you want him to have a good relationship with the general manager, but I think Glenn is the right hire because he kind of gets it. He's been through it. I just think that messaging of I was in your shoes, man. I was on that 95 team that was horrendous, but then I also got to be part of the turnaround with Parcells. And we were one half away from going to the Super Bowl. So I think that messaging will not get lost in translation to these players because it's like, all right, this guy's not a phony. He's one of us. Like he literally has been through it. He's worn this uniform. He's dealt with this fan base. He's done all the things that we're going through. And I just think that that's going to sit well with a lot of the players. I can't say it's a guarantee, but I do think it's going to score a lot of points in that locker room.
I would agree. I tried to monitor. I know there was an outpouring of support from current Jets players on AG. Did Garrett Wilson make any comments one way or another? Did you see?
Nothing. No.
Yeah, but I think ultimately Garrett Wilson, he stays here. I am nervous though. I think every Jets fan feels that kind of uneasiness in their stomach. But I would agree with you. I think if Mougey can just extend Garrett, that's priority number one, right? And if he does that, man, Jets fans across the board they'll build a statue for him right there.
Yeah, I hope that he is definitely proactive, unlike this previous regime in terms of doing extensions. I just feel like they always were not getting ahead of things. By doing it early, you're getting better market value because ultimately the price for the top guys who are getting extensions and free agents is only going to go up. So if you get Garrett in a new contract this year, in 2 years, when other guys who are his peers are getting extended, it's only going to make his contract look better. So just get ahead of it and make the guy happy. Like I ultimately think if they pay him and they show this season like that, they're headed in the right direction. They have the right offensive staff. They have the right infrastructure in place. Garrett's going to want to be a Jet for life. He's one of the most beloved players his organization's had in a long time. Like, I feel like he's very this might be a sensitive subject to some of our viewers and listeners, but like how Pete Alonso is viewed by the Mets. I know that obviously that's going in a weird direction, but it's a homegrown guy that, always, shows that he can produce in the big moments, that he's just a really likable player. And I want him to be a Jet for life. Like, I know that in the NFL, it's hard just because of all the turnover and injuries and whatnot. But, like, can Garrett Wilson just be a Jet for 10 years? Like, that would just be great. He's been one for 3. Let's get it for 10.
When you think about, like, the history of Jets receivers, number one guys, right? Like, Keyshawn was that guy. Keyshawn was very Garrett-esque, right? And then it was money, and that's why he got shipped out to Tampa. You think about Lavernius Coles, you think about Santana Moss, like all these guys that ultimately Lavernius came back, which was great in the deal for Santana Moss, which still goes up my ass sideways.
Weird.
By the way, like you think about those guys and we get them. And I mean, Garrett has had a start unlike anyone else in Jets history from a receiver perspective. Like
the best
he
you've ever
is
seen.
the guy. So you hope that they would learn from past Jets history mistakes and not let him out of the building. Like you simply can't. We can't go through another Keyshawn, another Lavernius, another Santana. Like those guys were core players. Like, he's the guy that you pay and that you build around and that you want to be part of this culture and part of the turnaround and part of the future success that hopefully this team has. You can't let him go.
Yeah, he's well said. I don't think any Jet fan. I think he has like the highest approval rating of a Jets player in a long time. Just by like he's like in the 95 to 98% percentile in terms of approval rating. Like that's crazy. Like I've never heard anyone say a bad thing about Garrett Wilson. And
he produces,
doesn't deserve it either.
He produces and he plays. Like he's never. I mean, knock on wood, never been hurt, never missed a game. Like where do you find that? He's a unicorn. Don't let him out of your building.
And he's quarterback proof. He's shown that he can produce with bad quarterback play. That's crazy. So, it's kind of like DeAndre Hopkins and Terry McLaurin before they got quarterbacks. Think about it. That's exactly what he is. Like
exactly.
And look how good Terry is now that he has a quarterback. Like that's what Garrett could be.
Everybody wants G-Dub to be Terry McLaurin in a year. Like that's it. Yep.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we will definitely react to the staff once there's some more staff hires and whatnot, whether it be in the front office or the coaching staff. We will definitely do some more shows. But Russo, any closing thoughts as we head into a big day in Jets history? Hopefully, a monumental day that we think back in 5 to 10 years is the start of something good. We're not predicting it. We're hoping. We're hopeful. Yes. But any closing thoughts as we head to Glen Day?
Cautiously optimistic, right? There's the pendulum swings. We always talk about this. Like we remember, even Mangini was kind of criticized for being a little too disciplinary, a little too much of a dictator, right? And then they swing to Rex Ryan. So remember how these things go. But I think this is one that kind of is enough of a swing, but still lands in the middle where I think ultimately this could be the one that gets us back on the right path and where we'll go. Yep. The other point that I'll make is as we're talking about staff, I know our own Will Parkinson has been all over this, but getting for Aaron Glenn, bringing in a guy like Mike Munchak, who would be his, Bill Callahan to Rex, like that would be something that would really, really excite me. Like the coaching on the offensive line front has been lackluster for this team since Bill Callahan left. Like that's something that you need to get back to. And getting a guy like Munchak, who is the best in class, along with Bill Callahan to coach the offensive line, I think would be a huge get. That's something on top of Todd Haley, on top of Nick Caley, Steve Wilkes, guys like that we're talking about. Like that would be, I think I'd put an emphasis more on him than probably anybody else. But the press conference tomorrow, I'm excited for it. Let's see what AG says. Let's see what Mougey says. I think we're back in, man. They pulled us back in. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm excited too. But like again, it doesn't matter until September. In the grand scheme of things, like we're aiming to be where Kansas City and Buffalo are today, which is in the AFC title game, fighting to get into the Super Bowl. It's been 15 years since that's happened. So let's hope. But again, I'm excited. I'm optimistic. Cautious optimism. I'm not like guaranteed. I think I get a lot of people online always saying like, you always like you're kind of like always drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm like, no, I rip them when they deserve it, and they've definitely deserved it for a long time. And I think that you can't just go into a new regime just being like they're gonna suck just like the rest of them. Like Correct. We don't know. They could end up being great. We have no idea. But I'm cautiously optimistic. But I need to see it on the field. I need to see what they're doing from a process standpoint before I make any rash judgments. But thank you everybody for tuning in. It is a different time than we're used to doing for this show, but we appreciate everyone tuning in on a Sunday morning. And if you're listening, maybe Sunday evening, Monday morning, whatever it may be, you may actually be listening to this right after Aaron Glenn's address. We don't know. But make sure to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Turn on the Jets Live in the search bar and you'll see it. We love a 5-star review. That really goes a long way for this show. Make sure to subscribe to the Badlands YouTube channel where you can get the video feed for this as well. You get that. You get clips from Badlands. I know that they've been dropping full-length episodes as well to kind of get people to get to the Patreon, which is another thing that you should be subscribing to at this point. Best premium Jets content you're going to get. You get the Newmark files. If you haven't heard about those, I recommend subscribing to Badlands. I know we just surpassed 4,000 Patreon subscribers, which is awesome. And if you haven't heard, there is a live Badlands show April 11th in New York City. Make sure to get your tickets for that. I believe that they're almost sold out already. I am tentative. I'm trying to be there, but I do have some personal obligations I might have to attend to. So that's why I can't commit, but I'm aiming to be there. And we do appreciate all the support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.